The alarm screamed through the small shuttle as Commander Marcus Cole gripped the controls with white knuckles, his heart pounding against his ribs like a drum that had lost all sense of rhythm. "Come on, come on," he shouted at the machine, pulling hard on the steering column as another piece of asteroid debris slammed into the left wing and sent sparks flying across the viewport like angry fireflies. In the void of space the shuttle was not built for combat or for surviving asteroid fields. And Marcus knew this better than anyone, because he had told the Galactic Union diplomats exactly that before they sent him on this foolish mission to the edge of known space. But did they listen to him? The veteran commander with 15 years of experience navigating the dangerous sectors of the galaxy? No, they did not. They simply smiled their politician smiles and told him that this was a routine flyby, a simple observation mission near Velrith Prime, and that nothing could possibly go wrong because the Korathi had not left their planet in 300 years. Well, something had gone very wrong indeed. And now Marcus was watching his engine temperature climb into the red zone, while the planet below grew larger and larger in his viewport. The Korathi were one of those species that every spacefarer learned about during their first week of training at the academy, not because they were friendly or helpful, but because they were absolutely terrifying and completely unwilling to talk to anyone from the outside worlds. Standing at 8 feet tall, with bodies covered in thick fur and natural armor plating along their spines and shoulders, the Korathi resembled what Marcus imagined ancient Earth wolves would look like if they had evolved to become the apex predators of an entire planet, and then decided that everyone else in the universe could simply go away and leave them. Alone their claws could cut through starship hulls like butter. Their teeth could crush titanium alloy, and their strength was legendary across every corner of the known galaxy, and Marcus was about to crash land right in the middle of their territory. Another explosion rocked the shuttle as the right engine finally gave up its desperate fight against gravity and physics, and Marcus felt the entire craft begin to spin in a way that made his stomach turn somersaults. "Mayday! Mayday!" He called into his communication device, knowing that the signal would take hours to reach the nearest Union outpost, and that help would take days to arrive even if they launched a rescue mission immediately. "This is Commander Marcus Cole of the diplomatic vessel Starling. I am going down on Velrith Prime. Repeat, I am going down on Velrith Prime." The ground rushed up to meet him with terrifying speed, and Marcus did the only thing he could do in that moment. He pulled back on the controls with all his strength, activated every emergency system the shuttle had, and prayed to whatever forces might be listening that he would survive the impact. The crash was violent and loud, and absolutely horrible in every way that a crash could be horrible. Metal screamed as it tore apart. Glass shattered into a million pieces that flew through the cabin like tiny daggers. And Marcus felt his body slam forward against his safety harness with enough force to knock the breath from his lungs and make stars dance across his vision. Then there was silence. The kind of deep and heavy silence that comes after disaster, when the world seems to hold its breath and wait to see what will happen next. Marcus opened his eyes slowly, testing each part of his body to see what still worked and what did not. And he was amazed to discover that aside from some cuts and bruises and what felt like a very badly twisted ankle, he was alive and mostly in one piece. "Well," he said to the empty cabin, his voice rough and shaky, "that could have gone better. But I suppose it also could have gone much worse." He released his safety harness and fell forward onto the broken console, catching himself with his hands before pushing up and looking around at what remained of his shuttle. The answer was not much. The Starling was destroyed beyond any hope of repair, with smoke rising from a dozen different systems and sparks still flying from exposed wiring that hung from the ceiling like mechanical vines in a metal jungle but the emergency beacon was still working, its small green light blinking steadily in the chaos, sending out a signal that would eventually reach Union space and bring help to his location. All he had to do was survive until then. Marcus gathered what supplies he could find among the wreckage. Some emergency rations that would last perhaps a week if he was careful, a medical kit that would help with his injuries, a small hand light, and a knife that was meant for utility work but could serve as a weapon if absolutely necessary. Did not have much hope that a small knife would help him against a Korathi warrior, but it was better than having nothing at all. The shuttle's hatch was jammed shut by the impact, so Marcus had to kick it several times before it finally gave way and swung open to reveal the world outside Devil Earth. Prime was beautiful in a wild and dangerous way, with forests of massive trees that stretched up toward a purple sky, their leaves a deep blue color that Marcus had never seen on any other world. The air was thick and warm and filled with strange scents that his human nose could not identify. And somewhere in the distance he could hear the calls of creatures that were definitely not friendly little birds. Stepped out of the ruined shuttle and took his first breath of alien air, filling his lungs with the atmosphere of a world where humans were not welcome, and where the natives would probably kill him on sight. If they found him, okay. Marcus, he said to himself, using the sound of his own voice to push back against the fear that was trying to crawl up from his stomach and wrap itself around his heart. You have been in bad situations before, and you have always found a way out. So you will find a way out of this one too. He had no way of knowing that Korathi scouts had already spotted his shuttle falling from the sky. He had no way of knowing that they were already running back to their settlement to report the intrusion to their leaders. And he certainly had no way of knowing that within the ancient Hall of Fangs, a legendary warlord named General Rex Thar was about to receive news that would set in motion a chain of events that would change the relationship between humans and Korathi forever. All Marcus knew in that moment was that he was alone on a hostile planet, that help was days away, and that he needed to find shelter before the sun set and the night predators came out to hunt. He looked at the forest around him, squared his shoulders, and began to walk toward a rocky outcropping in the distance that might provide some protection from the elements and from whatever might be watching him from the shadows. Between the trees, the adventure was just beginning, and Marcus Cole had no idea what was waiting for him in the days ahead. The Hall of Fangs was the most sacred place on all of Velorith Prime, a massive structure carved from the bones of ancient beasts that had once ruled the planet before the Korathi rose to power and claimed their world as their own. Huge rib bones formed the arches of the ceiling, and skulls the size of small shuttles lined the walls, their empty eye sockets seeming to watch everyone who entered with the silent judgment of creatures long dead. This was where the War Council met whenever matters of great importance needed to be discussed, and there was no matter more important than what the scouts had just reported: an alien had fallen from the sky. General Vrexthar stood at the center of the Great Hall, his massive form towering over even the other Korathi warriors who had gathered to hear his words, and his golden eyes burned with a fury that made the younger soldiers step back in fear. He was the greatest warrior the Korathi had produced in 10 generations, a leader who had united the scattered clans under one banner and who had sworn to protect his people from the corruption of the outside galaxy. And now, after 300 years of perfect isolation, a human had dared to set foot on their sacred soil. "Tell me again what you saw," he growled at the scout who knelt before him, his voice deep and rough like stones grinding together in an earthquake. The scout, a young warrior named Kethra, kept his head low as he spoke. The flying machine fell from the sky, trailing fire and smoke, and it crashed in the forest near the Blue River. And when we approached to investigate, we saw the creature climb out of the wreckage. "Describe it," Rexthar demanded. "It is small." "My general, no taller than a half-grown cub, and its skin is smooth and soft, without fur or armor of any kind, and it walks on two legs like we do. But it moves slowly and seems weak. A murmur ran through the assembled warriors, some of them laughing at the description of such a pathetic creature. But Vrexthar did not laugh, because he had heard the stories about humans from the traders who occasionally tried to make contact with his people. Humans were everywhere in the galaxy now, spreading across the stars like a disease that could not be stopped. And they were known for being clever and persistent and absolutely impossible to get rid of once they had decided they wanted something. The humans are the ones who call themselves the builders of empires, the general said, his voice carrying to every corner of the great hall. They are the ones who form alliances with every species they meet, and who spread their influence across system after system, like water flowing into every crack and crevice. He turned to face his council, his eyes moving from face to face as he spoke. And now one of them is here on our world, in our territory, breathing our air and looking at our forests, and probably already thinking about how to bring more of his kind to this place. The warriors growled in agreement, their anger rising at the thought of outsiders contaminating their sacred home. But there was an old law that had to be followed, a tradition that went back to the very beginning of Korathi civilization. And Grandmother Shavith was the one who reminded them of that. She was ancient beyond counting, the oldest living Korathi, and her fur had turned completely white with age. But her eyes were still sharp, and her mind was still clear. And when she spoke, even the general listened. The trial of worth must be observed, she said, her voice thin but strong. Before we declare any species an enemy worthy of true warfare, we must test them in the proving grounds to see if they have the heart of a warrior, or if they are merely prey to be hunted and forgotten. Vrexthar nodded slowly, respecting the ancient tradition, even though his heart wanted nothing more than to tear this human apart with his own claws. You speak truly, Grandmother. The old ways must be honored. He turned back to the scout. Bring the human to the proving grounds. Do not harm it yet. Simply capture it and bring it before the clans so that all may witness the trial. Kethra bowed his head and ran from the hall to carry out his orders. And the other warriors began to spread the word throughout the settlement that something exciting was about to happen. By the time the sun began to set, thousands of Korathi had gathered in the ancient amphitheater that served as the proving grounds, filling the stone seats that rose up in circles around the central arena. Mothers brought their cubs to witness the spectacle, believing that it would be a good lesson for the young ones to see how the Korathi dealt with intruders. And the cubs wiggled with excitement because they had never seen an alien before, and they could not wait to find out what one looked like. Marcus Cole had not expected to be captured so quickly. He had been trying to find water when the Korathi scouts surrounded him, appearing out of the forest like ghosts made of fur and muscle and very, very sharp claws. And he had known immediately that fighting would be pointless, so he had surrendered, raising his hands in the universal gesture of peaceful submission. And he had allowed them to bind his wrists and lead him through the forest toward whatever fate awaited him when he saw the amphitheater filled with thousands of the massive alien creatures, all of them staring at him with hungry golden eyes. His heart sank into his stomach and stayed there. This does not look good, he muttered to himself as the guards pushed him into the center of the arena and stepped back to join the circle of warriors that surrounded the space. Then he saw the biggest Korathi of all step forward, and Marcus knew without being told that this was their leader, the one who would decide whether he lived or died. General Vrexthar looked down at the small, soft creature standing alone in the arena, and he felt something that might have been disappointment, because this human did not look like a worthy opponent at all. Looked like something that would break if you squeezed it too hard. But the trial of worth was not about size or strength. It was about spirit. And so the general raised his voice so that all could hear. "Attack the human," he commanded. "Let us see what this creature is made of." The words echoed across the amphitheater, and every warrior in the first circle prepared to rush forward and test this strange alien visitor. But before any of them could move, something unexpected happened, something that no one could have predicted, something that would change everything. The cubs moved first. The cubs had been sitting with their parents in the lower rows of the amphitheater, their little tails wagging with excitement as they tried to get a better look at the strange creature standing alone in the center of the arena. They had never seen anything like it before. It was small and soft, and it had almost no fur except for the patch of brown stuff on top of its head. And its eyes were a strange color that none of them had ever seen in any Korathi. And it moved in a funny way that made some of them want to laugh when General Vrexthar gave his command to attack. The adult warriors began to step forward with their claws extended and their teeth showing, ready to test this alien creature and see if it had any fight in it at all. But the cubs were faster. They did not understand that this was supposed to be a trial of combat. They did not understand that the human might be dangerous. And they certainly did not understand that they were supposed to stay in their seats and watch quietly. All they understood was that there was something new and interesting in the arena, and they wanted to play with it. The first cub to break free was a little female named Paxa, who was known throughout the settlement for being the most curious and the most troublesome of all the young ones. And she wiggled out of her mother's grasp before anyone could stop her. "Paxa, no!" Her mother shouted, but it was already too late. The little cub charged down the stone steps and into the arena, her stubby legs carrying her as fast as they could go, her tail wagging so hard that her whole back end wiggled with each step. And she launched herself at the human with all the enthusiasm of a child who has just found a new toy. She hit Marcus right in the chest. And because she weighed almost as much as he did, even though she was just a cub, the impact knocked him completely off his feet. He fell backward onto the hard ground of the arena with a loud oof. And before he could even try to get up, Paxa was standing on his stomach and licking his face with her big wet tongue. "What the—" Marcus started to say. But then another cub hit him from the side, and then another. And then suddenly there were cubs everywhere. The other young ones had seen Paxa break free, and they had decided that if she was allowed to play with the alien, then they should be allowed to play with it too. And so dozens of them swarmed down from the seats while their parents shouted and tried to grab them. But cubs are fast when they want to be. And these cubs really, really wanted to meet the strange new creature. Within seconds, Marcus was buried under a pile of fuzzy, wiggling, yipping alien children, their little paws pushing at him, their tails wagging, their tongues licking any part of his skin they could reach, and their high-pitched voices making excited sounds that might have been laughter. The amphitheater fell completely silent. Every adult Korathi stared at the scene with wide eyes and open mouths, frozen in shock at what they were witnessing. Because this was something that had never happened before in all the long history of their people. Cubs were sacred to the Korathi. They were protected and guarded more carefully than any treasure, kept safe from all dangers and all outsiders. And the idea of allowing an alien to touch them was unthinkable, and yet there they were, rolling around with this human creature like he was just another cub from the settlement. General Vrexthar started to roar an order for the parents to retrieve their young ones. But the sound died in his throat when he saw what the human was doing. Instead of trying to fight, instead of screaming in fear, instead of trying to protect himself from the small creatures that had tackled him to the ground, the human was doing something completely unexpected. He was laughing. It was a warm, happy sound that bubbled up from his chest and filled the arena. And as he laughed, he reached out and started to play with the cubs. He gently pushed one off his chest, only for it to dive right back at him with a happy yip. He rubbed another one behind its ears, in a way that made its back leg kick with pleasure. He let a third one gnaw on the sleeve of his jacket, without any sign of fear or anger, when one shy little cub hung back at the edge of the pile. Watching with nervous eyes, the human smiled at it gently and held out his hand, speaking in a soft voice that no one could quite hear. And the cub crept forward slowly until it was close enough to sniff his fingers. Then the cub's tail started wagging too, and it joined the pile with its brothers and sisters. Marcus had no idea what was happening or why, but he knew one thing for certain. These were children, and children were the same everywhere in the universe. It did not matter that they had fur and claws and came from a species that wanted to kill him. They were still just kids who wanted to play, and Marcus had always been good with kids. He had nieces and nephews back on Earth, whom he had not seen in years, and he missed them terribly. And so he poured all that love and longing into this moment, playing with these alien cubs, like they were his own family. Grandmother Shavith watched from her seat high above the arena, her ancient eyes seeing more than anyone else could see, and her heart began to beat faster as memories from long ago stirred in her mind. She remembered the old stories, the ones that had been passed down from generation to generation since before the isolation began. Stories about other species in the galaxy who were different from all the rest. The old texts spoke of pack bonders, creatures who did not limit their love to their own kind, but who formed connections with any being that showed them affection. They were supposed to be myths, fairy tales told to cubs at bedtime, but here was one right before her eyes. "By the ancestors," she whispered, and her voice was shaking in a way it had not shaken in many, many years. "It is true. The stories are true." Down in the arena, Marcus had given up trying to get back on his feet, because every time he tried, another cub would knock him down again. And honestly, he did not mind at all. Their fur was soft and warm. Their little tongues tickled when they licked his face, and their happy sounds made something in his heart feel lighter than it had felt in a very long time. For a few beautiful minutes, he forgot that he was stranded on an alien planet, forgot that he was surrounded by creatures who wanted to kill him, forgot everything except the simple joy of playing with children who did not care that he was different. And in the stands, thousands of Korathi parents watched their cubs play with the enemy, and they did not know what to do, or what to think, or what to feel. Everything they had believed about outsiders was being challenged by the sight of their children's happiness. And that was the most dangerous weapon of all. General Vrexthar stood frozen at the edge of the arena, his claws extended and his muscles ready for violence. But he could not move forward, and he could not give the order to attack. The ancient law was clear, absolutely clear, written in stone and blood and bone since the very beginning of Korathi civilization. Anyone who harms a cub or causes a cub distress faces immediate death without trial and without mercy. It was the most sacred law of all, more important than any treaty or tradition or command from any general. Because the cubs were the future, and the future had to be protected at all costs. But this human had done neither of those things. He had not harmed them. He had not frightened them. He had not even tried to push them away when they swarmed all over him. Like he was a new climbing toy. Instead, he was making them happy, truly and genuinely happy. And Vrexthar could see it in the way their tails wagged, and hear it in the sounds of their laughter, and feel it in the joy that radiated from the pile of cubs in the center of the arena. If ordered his warriors to attack now, the cubs might be hurt in the chaos, and that was something he could never allow. If he ordered the parents to retrieve their young ones by force, the cubs would cry and scream and claw at anyone who tried to take them away from their new friend, and that would cause them distress. The general was trapped by his own laws and his own love for the children of his people, and he did not know what to do. The silence in the amphitheater stretched on and on, heavy and strange. As thousands of Korathi waited for their leader to give them guidance, then Grandmother Shavith began to descend from her seat, moving slowly down the stone steps with the careful grace of someone who has lived long enough to know that rushing is rarely necessary. The crowd parted for her as she walked, every Korathi bowing their heads in respect for the keeper of histories and the speaker of old truths. And even General Vrexthar stepped aside as she entered the arena. Marcus looked up from the pile of cubs and saw the ancient Korathi approaching, her white fur glowing in the light of the setting sun, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him nervous. "Hello," he said, because he did not know what else to say. And 3 of the cubs took advantage of his distraction to lick his ear sheath, stopped a few feet away, and studied him for a long moment. Watching the way he interacted with the cubs even while he was looking at Hirsch, saw how his hands never stopped moving, gently patting and rubbing and scratching in all the places that made the young ones wiggle with delight. She saw how he adjusted his behavior for each cub without even thinking about it, being more gentle with the shy ones and more playful with the bold ones. She saw how one tiny cub had fallen asleep on his chest, curled up against his warmth like he was the safest place in the entire world. "Do you know what you are doing, human?" she asked, her voice carrying across the silent arena. Marcus shrugged, as best he could, with cubs draped all over him. "Playing?" he said, and his confusion was genuine, because he truly did not understand why everyone was staring at him like he had just performed some kind of miracle. Sheath turned to face the assembled Korathi, raising her voice so that all could hear, and her words shook the foundations of everything they had believed for 300 years. "The old texts spoke of this," she said. "The histories that we thought were myths and legends, stories told to amuse cubs before they sleep, they were not fiction at all. They were truth." She pointed at Marcus with one long clawed finger. "This creature is what the ancients called a pack bonder, a being who forms attachments not through blood or species or obligation, but through something far more powerful." The crowd murmured in confusion, because most of them had never heard this term before, and those who had remembered it only as a children's tale. "Pack bonders do not limit their love to their own kind," Shavith continued. "They adopt anything and everything that shows them affection. They protect creatures they have only just met. They form bonds with beings that are completely different from themselves." She walked closer to Marcus and knelt down beside him, and the cubs who were awake looked at her with curiosity, but did not stop their playing. "Tell me, human," she said, "if I had ordered my warriors to attack these cubs while you were lying here with them, what would you have done?" Marcus did not even hesitate. "I would have protected them," he said, and there was steel in his voice, despite the softness of his situation. "Even though they are not your young?" "They are kids," Marcus said simply. "They are just kids. And kids need to be protected." Shavith nodded slowly, a strange expression on her ancient face that might have been wonder, or might have been sorrow, or might have been something in between. "You would have died," she said. "My warriors would have torn you apart in seconds. And yet you would have tried anyway." "Yes, why?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, one hand still rubbing the belly of a cub who had rolled onto its back. And when he spoke, his voice was thick with an emotion he could not quite name. "Because they trusted me," he said. "They jumped on me without any fear. They played with me like I was their friend. They fell asleep on me like I was family, and that means something. It means I am responsible for them now, even if I only met them 5 minutes ago." Grandmother Shavith rose to her feet and turned to face General Vrexthar, and her eyes were wet with tears that she did not try to hide. "This is what we lost when we closed ourselves off from the galaxy," she said. "This is what we forgot existed, this capacity for love that knows no boundaries. this instinct to protect and nurture anything that asks for care. She gestured at the cubs who were still playing with Marcus, their happy sounds filling the arena. Look at your children, General. Look at how they glow with joy. And ask yourself this: is this creature really your enemy? Vrexthar looked at the pile of cubs, at his own son and daughter who were among them, and he saw something that made his heart crack open, just a little bit. His daughter, the shy one who never played with strangers, was curled up against the human side with her tail wrapped around his arm, and she was smiling. The general had not seen her smile like that since her mother died 2 winters ago, and the sight of it broke through all his anger and all his hatred and all his fear of the outside world. Something was changing inside him, something ancient and hard that he had built around his heart to protect it from pain. And he did not know if that was a good thing or a terrifying thing. Perhaps it was both. The days that followed the trial of Worth were unlike anything that Corathi had experienced in 3 centuries of isolation. And it all began when General Vrexthar did something that shocked everyone, including himself. He did not order the human killed. Instead, he declared the trial complete, stating that Marcus Cole had proven his worth not through violence, but through something that Corathi had never considered as a measure of strength. The capacity to love without condition or limit it was a controversial decision that caused arguments and debates throughout the settlement, with some warriors insisting that the old ways demanded blood, and others wondering if perhaps the old ways were not as wise as they had always believed. But one thing was certain: the cubs would not allow anyone to harm their new friend. Every time a warrior approached Marcus with hostile intentions, a swarm of young ones would appear out of nowhere and place themselves between the human and the danger, their little tails raised in warning, and there, baby teeth showing in fierce expressions that would have been terrifying if they were not so adorable. The parents could not punish their children for protecting someone who made them happy, and they could not force the cubs to abandon a friend without causing the exact kind of distress that the ancient laws forbade. Marcus had become untouchable, protected by an army of fuzzy little guardians who followed him everywhere he went. He slept in a small shelter that had been hastily constructed near the main settlement, and every night a different group of cubs would sneak out of their homes and curl up around him like he was a giant pillow made of warmth and safety. Their parents would come looking for them in the morning and find them piled on top of the human, snoring peacefully while he lay awake with an expression that was equal parts exhaustion and joy. "I have not slept properly in 4 days," Marcus admitted to Grandmother Shavith when she came to visit him. "But honestly, I do not mind. They are too cute to push away." The old Corathi watched him with the same intensity she had shown during the trial, still studying him like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "You are very strange." "Human," she said finally. "I have been told that before," Marcus agreed with a tired grin. During his time in the settlement, Marcus learned many things about the Corathi that the Galactic Union had never known. He learned that they loved music, and that their songs could shake the ground with their deep, powerful harmonies. He learned that they valued family above all else, and that the reason they had isolated themselves was to protect their cubs from a galaxy they saw as dangerous and corrupting. He learned that they were not monsters at all, just people who had been hurt by outsiders long ago and had decided that the only way to stay safe was to push everyone else away. And the Corathi learned things about humans that surprised them even more. They learned that humans had once been weak and slow and soft, just as Kethra had described, but that they had survived and thrived by forming bonds with other creatures and working together. They learned that humans kept animals, called dogs that they loved like family members, and cats that ignored them completely but were loved anyway, and even fish and birds and creatures that could not love them back at all. They learned that humans formed attachments so quickly and so deeply that they would cry when their machines broke down, give names to rocks and plants, and risk their lives for beings they had never met simply because those beings needed help. You are a species of fools, General Vrexthar said to Marcus during one of their private conversations. His tone gruff but not unkind. Perhaps, Marcus agreed, but we are happy fools. And I think that is worth something. The general was quiet for a long minute. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the trial. You would have fought for them, he said. Not a question but a statement. My cubs? The ones who knocked you down in the arena. You would have tried to protect them if I had ordered them harmed. I would have died trying, Marcus confirmed. But yes, I would have tried. Why? The general demanded, and it was the same question Grandmother Shaveth had asked. But this time there was something different in the voice. Something that sounded almost like hope. They are not your blood. Not your species. Not your responsibility. So why would you give your life for them? Marcus thought carefully before he answered, wanting to give the general the truth, and not just the easy response. Because they looked at me with joy instead of fear. He said slowly, because they trusted me without knowing anything about me. Because they made me feel like I belonged, even though I was the strangest thing they had ever seen. And because kindness like that deserves to be protected at any cost. Vrexthar stared at him for a long time, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion that he was not used to feeling. My daughter smiled for the first time in 2 years because of you, he said. Her mother was my bonded mate, my heart companion, and when she died, my daughter stopped smiling, stopped playing, stopped being the joyful cub she once was. And nothing I did could bring her back. He looked at Marcus with new eyes, seeing not an enemy or an intruder, but something he had not expected to find. Then you came, and within 1 hour of meeting you, she was laughing again. And I do not know what to do with that. Maybe you could start by not wanting to kill me. Marcus suggested the general made a sound that might have been a laugh, deep and rumbling like distant thunder. And it was the first time Marcus had heard any Korathi laugh. The human rescue ship finally arrived 8 days after the crash. They did not find a prisoner waiting to be freed. Instead, they found Commander Marcus, Cole sitting in the center of the Korathi settlement, teaching a group of cubs how to play a human game called Fetch, using a piece of debris from his ruined shuttle. Surrounding him were dozens of adult Korathi, including General Vrexthar himself. And they were watching with expressions that the rescue team could not quite identify, that looked suspiciously like smiles. What happened here? The rescue captain asked in amazement. Marcus just grinned and threw the debris again, watching as 3 cubs raced after it with their tails wagging. I made some new friends, he said simply. 3 months later, the Korathi officially ended their 3-century isolation and joined the Galactic Union as full members. The treaty they signed contained many provisions and agreements and promises. But the most important clause was one that General Vrexthar had personally insisted upon. Written in his own hand and sealed with his own blood, all Korathi diplomatic vessels shall carry a human crew member. It read, for the cubs and across the galaxy. Species who had feared the Korathi for generations began to understand something wonderful, that the most powerful force in the universe was not claws or teeth or weapons of war. It was love, freely given and freely received, the kind of love that crossed the boundaries of species and made enemies into family. Humanity had proven their worth not by fighting, but by playing with the children of their enemies, and that, as Grandmother Shaveth would later write in her histories, was the most human thing of all.